All right, bang. Today is Thursday. It is June 26th. Welcome to the Dog Walk, presented by Barstool Sports. Our last show before break. We get a week off next week, so we'll be best ofs all week. Before we get into it, though, I want to talk about my friends at Ghost. Obviously, we've told you about the flavor of the summer, Chief. Chief's drinking a peach. We've told you about the flavor of the summer, like I said, the iced tea lemonade. I've got the Bubblicious cotton candy right here.
Of course you do.
What does that mean? A, B.
That's a new flavor. You're on the forefront of new products.
Yeah, I
find something I like and I stick with it. There's a little fridge of the peach that I just hit up, and I try to. I mean, people know about it, but I try to I don't tell anybody.
Yeah. That's a nice peach fridge over there.
Mm-hmm.
I had to hit them up. I was like, I gotta try the new Bubblicious flavors.
Yeah,
it's crazy what these guys do. Like they have formulated a perfect cotton candy Bubblicious.
It's like, how do they do that?
I don't know, but they're great at it.
They're scientists.
They are.
Yeah.
So go check it out. Ghost, fully transparent, fully loaded, feel good energy. There's also another Bubblicious flavor. It's strawberry. You know, the one that you've had before in the grocery store too. 0 sugars, no artificial flavors, 200 milligrams of natural caffeine. Now sold nationwide for a limited time only. Don't sleep on this new epic flavor. Also want to talk about Blue Chew. Guys, enter the room dick first. Blue Chew isn't just a tablet. It's a cheat code for your crotch. Stronger, harder, longer lasting. Like someone gave your downstairs a pep talk and a gym membership. Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. Jack could climb his own stalk on one of these beans. Guys, this isn't just about performance. This is about legacy or third legacy. Give her group chat something to talk about. You know when you lay it down. They're talking about how it gets up. Nothing makes you more of a legend than a little Blue Chew. Discover your options at BlueChew.com, and we've got a special deal for our listeners. As always, get your first month of Blue Chew free. Just use promo code DOGWALK at checkout and pay $5 for shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's mission to upgrade humanity one thrust at a time. Head to BlueChew.com for details and safety info, and big thanks to Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast. All right, Chief. Not the most lighthearted topic before break here.
No.
Not at all. But
it's an Eddie request. So
it's a me request because when something of this magnitude happens, naturally I'm curious.
Yeah, of course.
I wish I paid attention more in school. I wish I knew more about this type of shit. Obviously, we know you're not an expert.
Definitely not.
But you could break it down in idiot terms to me.
Yeah, that's what we're going to try to do.
I feel like a lot of people are in the same boat.
Yeah, we're talking Iran.
Yes.
We're talking Iran.
I assume people have seen that from the title, but
yeah.
Yes.
And we're going to go back and do more of the history of Iran, and then maybe at the end we'll do a little bit of what's going on now.
Yeah.
But the history and our involvement is fucking wild, and it goes back a long way. Mm-hmm. It goes really back to 1921. If you like Western influence over Iran and their governments and the different regime changes and how we ended up with us being they're in the axis of evil and them calling us the Great Satan. You know, they call us.
And they call us Great Satan.
They were we're the big Satan and Israel's the little Satan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No shit. And for the record,
that's the death to America. You've seen those chants before.
Yeah. I'm not particularly interested about getting into the ins and outs of this weekend. I just want to know,
yeah,
why is there so much beef in the first place?
We got here.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
That's what we're going to try to do.
Do you know anything about this, Lance?
Kind of just barely what they had taught us in school, but that really only goes back to maybe the 80s. So
yeah, and we've been fucking around in there a lot longer than the 80s. So you're probably talking about the Iranian Revolution. Everybody has seen that. You've seen the movie Argo, right?
I'm familiar with it.
You never saw it?
No, it won Best Picture.
Yeah, it was a very good movie.
Yeah.
And it's about all this mission because they had the hostage crisis, and there was a group of maybe, 6 people who got out or were in a different building and then ran to the Canadian embassy, and they had to do this whole thing where they did a fake movie production that they were filming in Iran and gave them fake Canadian passports and just barely got the only Americans out at that point.
No shit.
Great movie. It's a great.
Yeah, that was before I was really I've really only been super dialed into movies for the last 10 years.
When do we think? I think Argo, it was maybe 2014.
Yeah,
something like
right
that. Highly recommend though. It's a very good movie.
Yeah.
And I am not an Affleck guy.
2012.
2012. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So how the fuck did we get here?
So World War One, you had this great power. One of the Axis powers was the Ottoman Empire, which you've heard of that, I assume.
Well, yeah, we talked Archduke Ferdinand. We've got into all that.
So the Ottoman Empire in the World War One, you had Germany, Austro-Hungarian, and the Ottoman Empire were the three Axis powers that were united. And then the Ottoman Empire really was a massive, massive country. And it was kind of ruled out of like what is now Turkey. Like that was like the headquarters, but they stretched, Iraq, North Africa, all these places. And when they lost, just like they did to the Austro-Hungarian Empire and parts of Germany, they chopped it all up and made it all these different. At that point, they weren't really countries per se. They were called like these British and French like protectorates, and that's what like Israel was part of. They're like, was it? It's not protectorate. It's not the word I'm thinking of. But they were like these different, like they were effectively ruled under the British and French empires of the day. And so in 1921, Iran has like a coup, and it was led by this military guy. His name was Reza Shah. Okay, so he takes power, and he's in charge until like 1941. So 1941, so he kind of like broken away from the strong ties with the British. And if you know where Iran is on the map, right? They have this, they're up against kind of, and this will be important later, but they're right next to Afghanistan and, kind of near the Balkans and like Georgia and Azerbaijan, which are part of the Soviet Union. And Iran, they had already found oil there. We're at the end of the Industrial Revolution. Oil is the commodity, the worldwide commodity. They know Iran. We've discovered oil there, and there was a company called the Anglo-Iranian, originally Anglo-Persian Oil Company. So Anglo-English, Persian, which would eventually become British Petroleum. But they had all these assets in Iran, and when it was decided that Iran was being a little too friendly with Nazi Germany in 1941, World War I, the Soviets and the British invaded and took out Mohammad Reza and replaced him with his son, the Shah. So his son is the Shah that eventually, like we know from the Iranian Revolution and these different points, but like he was really just, his father was the original, like, not a king, but like dictator of Iran. They kicked him out during World War II. The Soviets stayed until 1946, but Mohammad Reza becomes the Shah of Iran. But it's like this kind of weird period because now we're in like the Cold War, right? And so there's this growing democratic movement because Iran they have all these different factions. And in 1951, this guy named Mohammad Mossadegh is elected as prime minister. So he is democratically elected. He is in favor of a relationship with the United States and the West, but we, meaning America and the UK, are afraid of him because he's considered a nationalist, and they would hear nationalist and think what happened with the Soviet Union. So he has letters back and forth with Eisenhower and different members of the United States government because his move, and he promised this while he was running for election, is like, I'm going to nationalize the oil. I'm going to make that oil belongs to the Iranian people, and we're going to benefit from that oil instead of being this poor, desolate country where British Petroleum comes in and just takes everything, and the people of Iran get fucked. Like, that's under our feet. We want that, which I think is a pretty reasonable claim,
I'd say.
So we didn't like that. UK doesn't like that. So he does he gets elected in 51. In 1952, he nationalizes the oil. And then there's like immediate sanctions, like there's like a blockade, so they're not really letting them sell the oil. And British Petroleum and the UK government are like, well, hey, you nationalized and effectively stole all of the infrastructure and assets that we have invested in your country to get that oil. So like, you owe us money. And Mossadegh was like, I agree. We'll pay you, a reasonable price. We'll do it in the International Court of Justice. We'll come up with a price. We will pay that price. But it's like, we're not going to go back to the deal that we had before, because that was not benefiting our people. And I had run on, doing things for the Iranian people. So he writes a letter to Eisenhower and different ambassadors, being like, and saying like, hey, like, we need you to intervene here, because we can't even pay for the stuff because we're really not allowed to get our oil out on the market. And Eisenhower writes him back. And he's like, I'll read the sections here. It's a long letter. It was primarily because of that hope that the United States government during the last 2 years made earnest efforts to assist in eliminating certain differences between Iran and the United Kingdom, which have arisen as a result of the nationalization of Iranian oil. It has been the belief of the United States that reaching an agreement in the matter of compensation would strengthen confidence throughout the world that in the determination of Iran fully to adhere to the principles which render harmonious community of free nations. And he goes, the failure of the United Kingdom to reach an agreement with regard to compensation has handicapped the government of the United States in its efforts to help Iran, because they were asking for money. Iran was asking the United States for money and help with these sanctions. And they were like, that's a way of saying like, we're with England, fuck you. Okay. So towards the,
because like a NATO thing.
I don't even if it's a native thing. It might just be like
NATO. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, NATO. I don't know. It's not necessarily a NATO. I mean, that's the UK and the US have always had what they call a special relationship, and that goes back to the last 100 years or so, where we're trading partners. We share a common language. All of that stuff. Share a lot of intelligence, and we're stronger allies with the UK, and this goes back, we've talked about Alan Dulles, and this is kind of one of those things. There's multiple things going on here at the same time, where you have a country that effectively borders or nears the Soviet Union. We're in the Cold War. China just went communist, and there was this fear that this was going to sweep across the world. So when you have a guy who is elected by the people, saying he's governing for the people, and one of his first and biggest actions is to take the oil from these other people. It's like, well, this is, we don't like nationalists, and we don't want another China. So it's like, this guy basically has to go, is what was been decided by Eisenhower and really the Dulles brothers. So John Foster Dulles was the Secretary of State. Alan Dulles was head of the CIA. So the CIA and MI6, which is the British version of the CIA, get together and they're like, Mossadegh has to go. Like, we can't have Iran turn into China, and we're just not going to have it. And the other thing that was going on at the time, which is also in that book, The Devil's Chessboard, is you had this Egyptian guy named Nasser, who similar path. He rises to power, and he wants to create what's called Pan-Arabism. And Pan-Arabism basically was like, I want to reunite all the Arab countries of the world, going from Morocco all the way to Iraq, and everything in between. So all of North Africa, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, that's all going to be one country, Syria, Jordan. So you had this situation where it's like, we don't want that to become a thing. We're much better off having these 12, different countries that are all smaller that we can fuck with. And we don't want like a superpower in that region, but we don't want them to go communist. So we kind of have to play both hands. And we just basically can't let this Mossadegh guy turn Iran with all their oil, into an ally of the Soviet Union. So they decide they're going to kill him, or they're going to topple him rather. CIA, MI6, they foster an uprising, and they place Mossadegh under house arrest. They bring back the Shah and put him in power, and hey, you're back. The same guy that was ousted by Mossadegh in a democratically held election, put him back in power. And then he cuts a deal with the West for the oil, and he gets all the money, but the people hate him for it because everybody kind of knew what was going on. So he is, even though he's the Shah and he's the leader, he's hated by the people immediately, and it sold out his country. So he basically has a police state kind of keeping the Iranian people down, and you have all these dissenting voices rising against him. And in particular, you have the Ayatollah Khomeini, which that's the guy with the beard, dressed in black, and he is like a voice for like Sharia law, and he is a religious leader and a political leader in Iran. And he's starting like these protests, and they clash with police, and people die, and there's more protests, and there's an uprising. This is all happening in the 60s. And he says, neither the East or the West, being like, fuck the Soviet Union, fuck the Western NATO countries, their cultures. He called their cultures a plague on the world. He's like, the Middle East is for Islam, and he wanted everybody out. And he got placed in house arrest by the Shah in 1964, and then they kicked him out of the country. Like, you're in exile. So he lived in Iraq for a long time, and then he lived in France. And then as the Shah was getting sick and losing power, because these uprisings and protests never really stopped, it got to the point in 1978 where they actually did topple the government, because you had all these different factions align, and then we just couldn't stop them, and the people rose up, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came back, and he assumed power. So he was going to be the guy, even though you had you had more liberalized Iranians and then these hardcore religious people kind of uniting for a common cause against the Shah, and then they were all going to kind of battle it out. The Shah came in, and he became like the one voice and became very powerful. And then they had the Iranian hostage situation happen in 1979, and that lasted, for years until Reagan comes in. Carter really kind of brokered the deal, but it was like Reagan on his first day, all the hostages are out. And but since then, since the hostage crisis, it's like we have viewed Iran as like our mortal enemy because they took the hostages, and it was like a black eye for the United States. But really, like, we've been fucking around in that country, in that region, for a long time. Mm-hmm. Going back really in earnest in 1953, where it's like, that guy is not going to give us their oil for cheap. Fuck him. And so we teamed up to like kick out their democratically elected guy, who was, I mean, it's just letters back and forth, but by his letters are just like, can you please help us? And then we'll be with you guys, but we just can't, like.
Yeah, did we ever find out if that guy was actually coming from the right place, or was there reason to believe that he wasn't, that he was lying?
I think it's a weird time in history, where it's like, we are the superpower, but it's a bipolar world with very different worldviews. And if he's nationalizing the oil for the people, like his people, then it's like, well, are you communist? It's like, well, is that really communist?
Yes.
But like, because Alaska, like, if you live in Alaska, you're a citizen of Alaska, you get a check every year for the oil that comes out from underneath your feet. So I don't know how different it is from that. I don't know if I don't know enough about that guy to be like, he was a good actor or a bad actor or whatever. I can only read his own words. It sounds like he wanted a deal, and it sounds like, and that's like the overarching theme in that Devil's Chessboard with Alan Dulles, is that he had a very difficult time, or refused to do it, we should say, drawing a line between what's in America's interests versus what's in Wall Street's interests. So he really kind of weaponized the CIA, going even before his days, the CIA, on behalf of Wall Street. So is this good for America? Is this good for Wall Street? Well, as long as it's good for Wall Street. Yeah. And that's kind of been the CIA's modus of operandum, where it's like, we are going to, United Fruit, Cuba, all these other little things, these little regime changes, things that he's done, 1973 with Chile, they're all, the CIA did all that shit. It's like black ops, and they did Greece, and they were fucking around in France, and they're trying to just suppress communism. And they were trying to suppress communism and pan-Arabism at the same time, basically to protect this oil-rich world from becoming a Soviet satellite. And so I don't know, like, look, who knows? You can only read the history, but it seems like maybe we should have just cut some other deal and stop fucking around. Who knows what would have been, and maybe it would have been worse, but maybe it would have been better because this is objectively worse. So then Khomeini is in there in 80, and those fractures that are in the Iranian population with all the different groups that united to oust the Shah, well, now they're divided again. And it's like, it was a very weak alliance to begin with all these different political and religious entities in Iran. So it was not like a foregone conclusion that the Ayatollah and that regime was going to be here. You know, they're still here today. In 1980, it wasn't like that. He basically got a gift from the West to unify his country, and that was when the West was teaming up with Saddam Hussein, and Saddam Hussein there were disputes over borders and who has what oil rights along that Iraq-Iran border, and Saddam Hussein was like, going in. So you have Iraq, which was supplied by the United States and Israel, invading Iran. So now it's like, okay, now we have a common enemy again. So it was like a brutal war for 8 years. It never gets talked about. From 1980 to 1988, Iraq and Iran were at war, and we gave Saddam, either we gave it to him or we looked the other way as he did it. But he used chemical weapons then. He used mustard gas. He used sarin gas. It was like, and you would fight, like, Iran is a much bigger country than Iraq, but Iraq had like more money and more military weapons. And so they were having this like outrageous battle where Iran was like running out of supplies. They would just throw guys like, literally, they would have battles where it's like, here's a Quran, you run across this field, and like, you're armed with the Quran, and you're going to go attack these guys in Iraq. And they were just at a stalemate basically for years, but like hundreds of thousands of people died in this conflict. But that conflict inadvertently allowed the Shah to really have a stranglehold on power, because now it's like we are all united against Iraq. And there's this crazy clip in hindsight. Remember the name Donald Rumsfeld?
Yeah.
So he was Bush administration. I think he was Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
So he was in the Reagan White House, and he was in the Nixon White House too, and as different administrative positions. And so he was being asked, he was given a statement in the 80s about Saddam Hussein. And he's like, Saddam is like, pro-Western. He's, he's not a religious zealot. He's a guy we can work with. He certainly has different views than me, but, he's like basically like Saddam, like singing Saddam's praises to the media in 1980, or, in the 80s as we're funding them. And then somebody plays him that clip in like 2003 as we're getting ready to go in, and we've been calling him, Satan and all these different things for years and years. Like he's the new Hitler, Saddam Hussein, which obviously bad guy, like Saddam, bad guy. But then, so Rumsfeld, when the media plays him this clip in a press conference, he just goes, how do you like that? There I am with Saddam Hussein, and then like totally unfazed. Like he's just moving pieces around a chessboard. Yeah. We need Saddam to fight and fuck up Iran. Fine. Now we need a different enemy. Saddam again. And it's just like, it doesn't fucking matter that we were, he was our partner for a decade and longer than that. Cause Saddam Hussein was recipient of CIA money in the 50s and 60s. So before he really rose to power. So it's like we've been fucking around in that part of the world for so long. It's like, who's on whose side? Everything is always changing courses. Who's the enemy? And it's like, we put Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. Bush gave that speech where like, this is the axis of evil. And it's like, well, Iraq and Iran, like they hate each other. Mm-hmm. They hate each other. And so it was like a wild thing that we really were like funding a war to weaken Iran, which it did weaken them in many ways. but it strengthened the leader because he could unite all these different forces that were battling for power, and like who knows, maybe would have overthrown him inside his own country. But it's like, no, we can't worry about what's going on here. We have to just protect the borders against these invaders. And it's like a very similar thing happened. Remember, the Desert Storm, or like Saddam invaded Kuwait.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of evidence that like that was almost a setup of Saddam too, because he was accusing Kuwait of doing like the angular drilling. So it's like the law states that you're supposed to just be able to, you drill straight down under your own borders. He was accusing them of drilling on the border, but angling the pipeline underneath Iraq and be like, hey, like that's our oil. And so he was like, he brought it up in like the UN or the international court. And then he would raise concerns with his old pals in Washington from like when he was their ally against Iran, and be like, we're not worried about what goes on in the Middle East. Like we don't care. Like dude, like kind of like we're gonna the if you read the document and the statements, it's like we're gonna look the other way. You handle Kuwait. Well, we don't care. So he invades Kuwait, and then it was like, well, now he's the great Satan. We must defend Kuwait, even though and then I think he was like, wait, I thought you said it was cool.
I said it was fine.
Yeah. So, but like, who knows? Like he's a fucking bad guy. Like he's a bad guy. But it's like, I don't know. There's like mixed. I could see how there were mixed signals based upon the things that you can read. So I don't know. It's like a weird. So then that strengthens Iran, and Iran. Then we go into Iraq and we topple Saddam, and that becomes a fucking civil war. And Saddam, there's the Sunni and the Shiites, right? And Saddam, I always get them mixed up. Saddam was a Sunni. Iran's more Shiites. Uh-huh. So Saddam was in the minority, like population-wise, his party, and they were oppressing the majority. So as soon as he fell, and it was like the Ba'ath Party, which would be like, it's a political party, but they're all Sunnis. So you debath the entire country, and it just creates this power vacuum. And then Iran starts funding terrorism inside of Iraq against U.S. soldiers, because it's like, we'll support the Shia majority. So you did have like this sectarian civil war in Iraq while we were there. And it was just chaos and violence and all this shit. And it's because when that was a lot of their funding came from Iran. And they always say, like, Iran's the biggest state, sponsor of terrorism. It's like, that's probably true. Like they are doing that. So it's like this whole like weird mix and like a very muddy history where it's just like, this is where I get to the point where I'm like, don't we have enough money? Like, don't we have enough stuff? Like, can't we just figure out another solution? Let's stop fucking around in other parts of the world and just worry about ourselves. Mm-hmm. What were you going to say though?
Why? When we obviously went after Iraq and we took down Saddam, mm-hmm. there was no like goodwill built up with Iran during that point.
No,
like there was no.
I mean, they were still.
Like
we called
the enemy of my enemy and my friend. I don't know. Like I didn't.
I mean, we called even while that was going on. Bush called them the axis of evil, and that goes back. Have you seen that speech or that clip of the guy ran for president? He was General Wesley Clark, and he said he got a memo in 2001, like November of 2001. It was shown a memo because he's like, hey, I got to talk. Like some other staffer was like, I got to talk to you. And this is after 9/11, but before Iraq. And he goes, we're gonna invade Iraq. He's like, it's already been decided. He goes, well, why? What do they do? He goes, they didn't do anything. Well, why are we gonna go get them? I almost want to play it's fair use, so I know I can play the clip. I'm gonna find but there was like this memo where there were 7 countries. So I think it was 7 countries that we were going to topple, and like Iran is kind of the last one on the list now. It was like Iraq, Iran,
Afghanistan.
The Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." About 10 days.
Was this like a stand-up comedy set?
No, I mean he's speaking at a panel, but that's a 4-star general who ran for president as a Democrat. It was either in 2004 or 2008, something like that, maybe 2012. Like he in that like kind of John Kerry, Obama, Clinton era. Like he was a primary candidate who didn't really get very far, but a 4-star general. And then he more recently had another. Someone asked him about that clip, and he's like, "Actually, I saw that that list of countries and that like thought process in the 90s. Like the first time I saw it was in the 90s, like, 10 years before." So it's like, are we reacting to situations on the ground, or do we have a plan and we're just going through the list? And it's like, you would really hope that we're just reacting to things as they come, and we're not like, yeah, we're going to fuck up Libya. I mean, Libya, they have slavery now. Like we took out Gaddafi, again, like a guy with a bad history, but toppled that government, and then we're like, we're out. And then it was a civil war, and it's still kind of like 2 divided nations. Like you have like the 2 big cities there. One's Benghazi, and I'm blanking on the other one, but it was their former capital. You kind of just have like 2 like very unstable states with a mountain of oil, and then they have all these kind of like, like war leaders run around, and they will have like, it's on YouTube, I guess. Like you can watch them doing like slave auctions in Libya in 2024. Like it's fucking insane. Like, so Syria, that's like the other thing. Like Syria, remember Obama was going to go into Syria?
Yeah, I do.
And then, but that was like, we were still in Iraq and we're still in Afghanistan. Everyone's like, what? He was going to have the red line, like if he uses, chemical weapons, and then he got accused of using chemical weapons. And like, it was such like we're not fucking doing that. Like there's no appetite for that to go into Syria, even though we kind of did. So he didn't like do a formal campaign, but we sent special forces and different groups. And then just recently, within the last year, Assad was ousted. Do you know who's running that government now? Al-Qaeda. Like Al-Qaeda, like a guy who was in charge of Al-Qaeda was like a terrorist in Al-Qaeda or ISIS. I don't know. A terrorist group that we were fighting on the ground in different places. Now he's just like the head of state because we had to topple Assad. And it's like, so we were fighting Al-Qaeda all over the world. And then now that they're in charge of a country, we're fine with that. Like, it's like the whole thing is just kind of like, it's so convoluted and hard to follow. And it's just like, it just makes it, even without like knowing all the details, it's like, this is just too much. Like, we got to stop doing this.
So you think it's more incompetence or more self-interest?
I think it's arrogance and self-interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was always self-interest back in the, going back the origins of the CIA with the Dulles brothers, where it didn't, the companies have changed, that they're advocating for, but it's still like we're doing it to get whatever, like we have some kind of goal in mind. And then, but it's like, I just don't, and it's the same, he can make similar arguments about Ukraine, and you can make similar, it's just like, I don't know why we're doing all of this. And I'm sure people have opinions on it. I haven't seen a great argument for it. And especially now when, I guess it's a little different now with Putin and Russia, but it's like in 91 when when the Soviet Union fell, it's like, why not just, bring them in closer, make them an ally instead of always being so hostile. Like, we really helped a lot of those Eastern European countries with different loans and things like that post Iron Wall coming down. Didn't really do that with Russia. Kind of set them up to, I don't know, not necessarily set them up to fail, but like we did that documentary about what hockey was like.
The Red Penguins.
The Red Penguins in the 90s. It was like, holy fuck, like this place is the Wild West. And so I don't know. It's like, and now it's like, it's hard not to view the current situation through this prism of, we've been doing this for 70 years. Like, and then, all the same stuff where Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and they didn't, and the ones that they did use against Iran were possibly even likely supplied by us. So it's like, they were never really making their own necessarily. Like, they were at least aided, and then we looked the other way when they used them against Iran. But it's like, well, see, he's used them. He's got weapons of mass destruction. He's used them. He's used them against the Kurds. He's used them against the Iranians. Oh, I guess he's a fucking bad guy, which he is. But it's like, we gave it to him. So it's it's a bunch of fingers pointing in every direction, but we always end up, in trillions of $37 trillion in debt and soldiers all over the world. And I don't know. It's like a crazy situation.
So where are we at now? No, we're recording this on Wednesday, a day before.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a ceasefire between that. Did you see the clip of Trump too?
When
like the other day, because they announced that they're gonna have a ceasefire start in 12 hours, and then Israel's like, "Oh, okay, we got 12 more hours to bomb the shit out of these people," and so Trump was given like a press conference before getting on a impromptu one before getting on a helicopter. He's like, these two countries have been fighting for so long, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. It was like, whoa, I've never heard a president say fuck like that before. And so I don't, then it seems like we're still in a ceasefire, but we bombed their it was us, because we were the only ones that had the planes and the bombs capable of doing like those bunker. They had supposedly had the nuclear facilities under a mountain and shit, and we bombed the shit out of them. And Trump says they're destroyed. Other people say they're not destroyed. Iranians are saying we're going to continue with our nuclear program, and it's just like, so now it's like a negotiating, posturing. The whole thing just feels fucking like Fugazi to me. Like, we bombed them, but we didn't stop anything. And then they retaliated against our base in Qatar. Iran did. But they told Qatar and they told us that they were doing it. Like, hey, we're going to bomb you in like 6 hours. So get your people, make sure you're ready. But we have to bomb you because you bombed us. But, we don't want to kill it. We don't want to escalate any further. So we're telling you, but we have to, and we have to. And it's like, okay, you bombed us, but you didn't kill any Americans. So we're going to, let's have a ceasefire and get to the negotiating table. So it's like a very but then what are we negotiating?
Yeah. Can I ask a potentially dumb question?
Yeah. I've said a million dumb things on this podcast.
Yeah. How does, when you strike a nuclear base like that, how does not a Chernobyl happen? Like, what is?
Because I don't think that is a dumb.
It just blows my mind.
I don't think that's a dumb question, because it's like it has to get up to a certain level for it to be for it to have like that sort of reaction. So you have all the centrifuges, you have all like the raw materials, and there might be some like environmental impacts of a bomb like that going off, but it's like, I don't think it's a Chernobyl meltdown effect where you have like, it's just in the air and it's in the water, and I don't think it has that level of impact, because they weren't a finished product. Like, supposedly they were on their way to having a finished bomb. But even I don't know how you set off a nuclear bomb necessarily. Like, you have to start that reaction. I don't know if a regular bunker buster bomb would start off the nuclear reaction. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not a fucking scientist, but that's my guess. We'll have to get Oppenheimer on here next week.
Someone who's way smarter than us, please explain that.
Yeah. Not a nuclear
Yeah, but doesn't that
Physicists.
sound like in your head? It's like, how does that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have like uranium and plutonium and it gets blown up, you would think that even if it doesn't blow up like a nuke would blow up, it's still like a highly toxic thing that you don't necessarily want to be around. So I don't know exactly what, like, no pun intended, the fallout is of that, but it seems like a not great situation.
No, I would agree.
Probably have some hazmat suits guys in there doing cleanup.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm just Googling animals in Chernobyl right now.
How they look.
Not good.
Yeah.
But now I don't know. First article scared the shit out of me that I just pulled up.
Isn't it crazy how this is just, it's all due to like, this was set in motion in the fucking 20s, like 100 years ago, and really in earnest in 1953. And we're still dealing.
Going after it.
This is where it's like, it's hard not to have like an isolationist view, in my opinion, because it's like when they did that original coup in 53, CIA and MI6 were like, that was fucking great, because no boots on the ground, no Western people got killed, we get what we want, and we're good. We can just do this all over the world. And they tried in many places, because at that same time when that was going on, we were in a hot war in Korea, which is not exactly going well. And there were talks of like using tactical nukes in Korea, and then Truman and Eisenhower were like, we're not fucking doing that. But it was like Douglas MacArthur. Remember that general?
Yeah.
That name from World War II. So he was like the head of, like the general in charge of that war. And he's like, why don't we just nuke these guys? Because he had all the Chinese were coming in and supporting the North Koreans. And so like we were getting, like that 38th parallel or whatever was that line that's still the dividing line was kind of moving back and forth. And like when we were on our heels for a time, because they just had so many more bodies, it's like, why don't we just fucking nuke them? Like, we got the nukes, let's just fucking nuke them. And it was like, it's like when you have, like, when you're the hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And MacArthur was just like, we'll just fucking nuke them. And thank God, like the powers that be ahead of him were like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And also, you're fired. So yeah. But it is like, I don't know. It's like a fascinating thing, but I wish everyone would just chill. Why can't we all just chill? Can't we, like,
nice, right?
What I would like is if we just built nuclear facilities here for energy, and we just don't even use oil anymore. France is 80% nuclear. Why can't we be 80? They've never had any issues.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people advocating for that, right? Like Schellenberger we had on.
Schellenberger, yeah. There's like there's definitely more people now, because you had like the 3 Mile Island in Chernobyl in the 80s, and there was like this big movement to like shut down nuclear energy production. And so, and it was just because it's scary. Like it is scary, but it's like proven that, you could have like mini reactors. Like, do you know what powers subs? Nuclear energy. So you have nuclear, and like they have to be, because you can't have like exhaust from like a traditional combustion engine powering a sub and poisoning everybody in the sub.
Yeah. So
those have like incredible range, and they're very effective, and people aren't getting like cancer and shit from being on subs. So you could have like these little mini reactors that actually, can power, a neighborhood, a city, something like that. And like, so there is like a movement for that, but the problem is, because it is so scary, and if you did have a meltdown, like there's no insurance that will insure that business. So it's not investable. As like, if you were like some energy guy, some billionaire, if you're Elon Musk and you believe in this, it's nuclear energy at this point is still not investable, which is kind of why I think the government should do it. Because if they got, like we bailed out Wall Street in 2008 for what, trillions of dollars. Why don't we just do something that will benefit all the people and just have cheap, efficient energy that is, in theory, pretty clean? And then we don't need to have all this other shit, all these conflicts everywhere.
Makes sense on paper.
I think so.
All right.
Never going to get anything good.
No.
Everybody sucks.
That's the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Like I said, next week is all best ofs. Sorry to leave you on this note, but we'll be back soon.
Yeah.
And,
See you after the 4th of July. Yay, America. I love America.
Yeah, exactly. All right. See you next time.